Now, before we go on any further, let's just cut across to the MEA press briefing right now ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States. Listen in.
This will be Prime Minister's first official state visit to the United States. PM has earlier visited US roughly 6 times, both in bilateral capacities as also for multilateral events. First, about the program. The first leg of his program in the US is in New York, which starts on the morning of the 21st with celebration of the International Day of Yoga at the UN headquarters in the morning of the 21st. You would recall that United Nations General Assembly had adopted a resolution proclaiming June 21st as the International Day of Yoga. While in New York, Honorable Prime Minister will also meet a cross-section of prominent personalities and leaders. From there, he departs for Washington on 21st itself, where his program for the Washington leg commences. On the first day of his arrival in Washington, D.C., on 21st, the first key engagement would be an event that is focused on skilling for future, which essentially would try to bring out the key complementarities and the objectives that both systems seek to promote and achieve in the field of skilling and capacity building. On the same day, on 21st, there is expected to be, there will be a private engagement between President Biden and Prime Minister. On 22nd June, which is the second day of the program in Washington, that's the day of formal bilateral meetings, essentially would have 4 or 5 key components. The first component being the ceremonial welcome at the White House. The second component being a set of bilateral meetings between the two leaders as also the accompanying delegations. The third component is Honorable Prime Minister's scheduled address to the US Congress and the congressional reception thereafter. And the concluding component for June 22nd would be the ceremonial state dinner hosted by the Honorable President and the First Lady in honor of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. The day 3 of the Washington leg, which is June 23rd, Prime Minister's program again would have 4 or 5 key components. The first being his interaction, one-to-one interaction with select CEOs spread throughout the day. Thereafter, Prime Minister will also be hosted by the US Vice President and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken at the State Luncheon, which is part of the official state visit. Prime Minister will then interact with prominent professional personalities as also leaders from cross-section of the society at an event at the Kennedy Center. Prime Minister's last engagement in Washington, D.C. will be an interaction with the community leaders immediately after the Kennedy Center event, whereafter the Prime Minister will depart for Egypt. In terms of substantive context of the US visit, if I could just take a minute to highlight some of the key components on which we will continue to speak to you in coming days as the visit unfolds and depending on Honorable Prime Minister's interaction day to day during his visit to the US. The first is a milestone in our relationship between the two countries you heard Honorable External Affairs Minister say yesterday, it's a very significant visit, very important visit, a visit on which there is a genuine and widespread deep interest in the United States. Two, the visit is very rich in both form and in substance. Three, key component would be the leadership connect during the visit between the two countries. Four, naturally, an important element of the visit will also be discussion on the bilateral relationships, the line of effort, the objectives that we set for ourselves in terms of looking at next series of transformative agenda items in years ahead. And in that, I guess the effort would also be to build a network in which these new domains of partnership could be properly positioned. I must mention here that Honorable Shri Narendra Modi ji would be among the rare few leaders, world leaders, to have been accorded the honor to address the U.S. Congress more than once. Clearly, another key context which has always continued is a strong and widespread degree of bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress to the strengthening of this relationship. In terms of key elements of the relationship, many of which would feature very prominently during this visit. One, of course, as I said, is the political connect at the leadership level, high level of and very intense level of political exchanges has been one of the key features of our relationship. Just within this month, we have had 3 very high-profile visits from US to India, including of most recently, which is the National Security Advisor of the US, Jake Sullivan. Prior to that, Defense Secretary of the US, Excellency Lloyd Austin. And we also had the privilege of hosting Secretary of State Blinken earlier this year. The second key component which has been a very strong pillar of our relationship has been strong trade and investment partnership.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.